Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be betrayed by the one person who is supposed to love you the most? Today's story will take you on a shocking, heart-touching journey that will stay with you long after it ends. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe, watch the complete video, like it, and share it with your family and friends. And I have to ask, where are you watching from right now? Could you survive in a world where people trade lives like property and one stranger becomes your only hope? Stay with us to find out. Clara Ara's stomach ached in ways she had never known, both from the baby growing inside her and from the weight of the world pressing down on her small frame. She wiped at her eyes, but the tears kept coming, tracking lines of dirt across her cheeks. The air in the tiny cracked cabin felt thick and heavy, as if it too were judging her. The whispers from neighbors and the sharp glare of her mother's eyes were still fresh in her mind, burning deeper than the harsh frontier sun outside. Her mother, once a figure of safety and comfort, had become a stranger, her love replaced by contempt, her words now like daggers. It had started weeks ago. At first, Clara Ara had tried to hide the swelling of her belly, trying to hope that somehow the world would turn a blind eye, that maybe people wouldn't notice. But in a town like theirs, secrets didn't survive. Children pointed, women whispered behind cupped hands. Men stared too long, muttering as they passed her on the dusty streets. She had begged her mother for mercy, for understanding, for anything but the betrayal she was about to receive. But the woman only shook her head, her face hardening like the baked clay of the surrounding land. Desperation had driven her mother to a decision that would change Clara's life forever. Boone. She had said his name like it was a solution to a problem, as if Clara were a piece of property to be moved, traded, and discarded. Boone was a giant of a man, a hulking figure who moved like he owned the earth itself. He had hands the size of plates and shoulders wide enough to carry burdens no one else could. He rarely spoke, and when he did, his words were measured, precise, almost frightening in their calmness. He was respected and feared in equal measure, and Clara Ara's mother had thought him the perfect recipient for her shame. Clara Ara hadn't believed it at first. The idea that her mother could trade her like livestock for a single cow made her chest tighten in disbelief. A cow. That's all she was worth. A lump of flesh and shame handed over in exchange for a creature that provided milk and nothing more. She had argued, pleaded, even screamed. But her mother's mind was set, immovable as the rocky cliffs on the outskirts of town. The day Boone arrived, he didn't come with fanfare or judgment. He simply stood at the edge of the yard, his boots kicking up dust, his shadow long across the ground. Clara Ara remembered thinking how enormous he was, how silent, how impossibly still, like a mountain watching her falter beneath its gaze. Her mother handed her over with a shrug, barely looking at her daughter, and the tears had started before Clara Ara even reached Boone's side. She had never felt so small, so unwanted. The cow tethered nearby loaded softly, and in that moment, Clara Ara felt the cruel irony of her situation with a sharp, bitter sting. Yet Boone didn't touch her, didn't speak, didn't demand. He simply held the reins of his horse and waited, his eyes scanning her briefly, taking her measure. There was no cruelty in his gaze, no impatience, no hint of mockery, only a stillness that made Clara Ara's trembling almost worse because she couldn't tell what he was thinking. The ride away from her mother's land was silent, save for the occasional creak of Boone's saddle and the soft snort of the horse. Clara Ara hugged herself, trying to make herself disappear, trying to wish away the shame that clung to her like a second skin. She could feel Boone's presence beside her, solid and unyielding but not threatening. He didn't speak, and that was somehow comforting. The sun dipped lower, painting the prairie gold and crimson, and Clara's mind swirled with panic and fear. Where was he taking her? What would become of her child? Would she be forced into some unforgiving life, alone and despised? By the time they reached Boone's cabin, a small, rough, hued structure sat against a backdrop of rolling hills and scattered trees. Clara's tears had dried into streaks of dirt and dust, but the ache in her chest remained. Boone opened the door wordlessly, gesturing for her to enter. Inside, the air smelled of cedar, wood smoke, and something faintly sweet, perhaps a trace of Boone himself. There were no curtains, no lavish furniture, just the essentials, a bed, a table, a chair, and shelves with neatly stacked supplies. It was humble, but in that simplicity there was safety, and Clara recognized it immediately. Boone motioned toward a corner and set down a bundle of blankets and some food. He didn't touch her, didn't question her, didn't speak judgment. He simply watched quietly, and in his watchfulness Clara felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. A fragile spark of hope. She would have to survive this. She would have to endure. But maybe, just maybe, there was a chance that not all men, not all people would treat her like a commodity. For the first time since her mother's betrayal, she dared to imagine that her life, however uncertain, might still hold kindness. Days blurred into nights in Boone's cabin, each one a quiet testament to survival, fear, and fragile trust. Clara moved like a ghost through the small wooden structure, her hands never still, always cleaning, cooking, or tending to the few animals Boone had. She spoke rarely, afraid that her words would be judged or rejected, and Boone's silence was both terrifying and oddly comforting. He never pressed, never demanded, never treated her like the shameful object her mother had declared her to be. There was an unspoken rule, unspoken yet firm. Respect was given freely here. And Clara for the first time felt the fragile lift of her own dignity returning. Her belly had grown heavier with each passing day, and with it, so did her fear. The frontier was harsh, unforgiving, and she knew her mother's cruelty had left her without allies. She wasn't just facing childbirth. She was facing a world that had already condemned her. Yet Boone's presence. If this story touched your heart, make sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe for more stories.